Hello everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're digging into a story that is, frankly, one for the history books. We're tracking the incredible evolution of Nvidia. Okay, let's dive into this, because the sheer scale of what this company has achieved over the last 3 decades is almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're going to look at how a scrappy hardware supplier literally transformed into the very foundation of the modern technological world. Just look at that number for a second. $5 trillion. In October 2025, Nvidia became the very first company in human history to cross a $5 trillion market capitalization. It's absolutely mind-boggling. To put that into perspective, at one point in 2025, Nvidia alone was worth more than the combined value of all publicly traded companies in the United Kingdom. They are an absolute monolith. But to really grasp how they conquered the globe, we have to contrast this jaw-dropping wealth with where the whole thing actually began. Because, it's the ultimate Silicon Valley juxtaposition. The most valuable entity in the history of global markets, it didn't start in some gleaming high-tech corporate lab. It started in late 1992 in a booth at a Denny's roadside diner in East San Jose. Just 3 frustrated engineers, Jensen, Huang, Chris Milikowski, and Curtis Preem. They sat down, ordered some coffee, and mapped out a vision for the future of computing that was so compelling, they decided to risk everything and launch a startup. Part 1, A Diner in a Dream, Surviving the Startup Years. Let's move to and see how this builds, because those early days were anything but glamorous. Actually, Nvidia's first decade was mostly defined by intense, near-death struggles. When they officially launched in 1993, they had a mere $40,000 in the bank. And honestly, it almost ended just a few years later. Their very first graphics accelerator, the NV1, completely failed against Microsoft's new standards. Suddenly, their tech was totally obsolete. By 1996, Jensen Huang had to lay off more than half of his staff, shrinking the company from 100 down to just 40 people. They were right on the brink of collapse. So, what saved them? A miraculous $5 million lifeline from the president of Sega. That cash gave them exactly 6 months to live, just enough time to develop the Riva 128 chip, which was a massive hit and literally saved the company from extinction. And that profound brush with death ingrained an incredible underdog mentality right into the company's DNA. Jensen Huang actually used this grim quote to anchor his internal presentations for years. Our company is 30 days from going out of business. He wanted his team running scared. He wanted them fighting for survival every single day. And well, as you'll see, that relentless paranoid drive really fueled their eventual dominance. Which brings us to part 2, the graphics gamble, funding the future. This is where they figured out how to use the 1990s video game boom as a strategic stepping stone. So the crucial point is, Huang understood the power of what he called a flywheel. He realized that rendering video game graphics is incredibly difficult computationally, but unlike a lot of other complex computer science problems, the gaming market had an enormous built-in consumer base. So by selling chips to gamers, they generated massive revenue, and then they pumped that cash directly back into research and development to build even more powerful chips. It's kind of brilliant when you think about it. They were basically using teenagers buying video games to secretly fund the R&D needed to tackle the world's most complex computing challenges down the road. All right, part 3, the billion-dollar pivot, creating the architecture for AI. In the early 2000s, Nvidia made a massive, quiet gamble that would completely set the stage for the AI revolution. Thanks to that highly lucrative flywheel we just talked about, Nvidia invested over $1 billion into developing something called CUDA. Now, let's break that jargon down. Before CUDA, a graphics processing unit, or GPU, was strictly just for drawing images on your screen. That was it. But CUDA was a software platform that suddenly allowed programmers to use those GPUs for any kind of heavy parallel mathematics. Practically overnight, Nvidia transformed their chips from basic game renderers into highly accessible supercomputing engines. And this brilliantly illustrates why that gamble paid off. Think about how a 3D video game works. To render a world, your computer has to calculate the color and position of millions of pixels on your screen simultaneously. Well, it turns out that specific ability, processing thousands of distinct, complex calculations at the exact same time, is the precise mathematical architecture you need to train artificial intelligence. So almost by accident, by mastering video games, Nvidia had mastered the foundational hardware for AI. Moving right into part 4, fueling the AI boom, becoming the undisputed kingmaker. This is where decades of preparation wildly collided with skyrocketing global demand in the 2020s. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of their dominance. I mean, look at these metrics from early 2025. They control 92% of discrete desktop and laptop GPUs. They hold over 80% of the market for GPUs used to train and deploy AI models. And they provide the chips for 75% of the world's top 500 supercomputers. It's wild. They are the undeniable, unavoidable backbone of modern tech. Literally every major AI breakthrough you read about is almost certainly running on Nvidia hardware. And because of that, the power dynamic in Silicon Valley entirely inverted. Oracle founder Larry Ellison shared this incredible anecdote about a dinner he had at Nobu with Elon Musk and Jensen Huang. Ellison and Musk desperately needed Nvidia's H100 chips for their own data centers, and Ellison joked that the dinner was just an hour of sushi and begging. That is an entirely unprecedented supply and demand dynamic. You have the wealthiest software titans on Earth literally bowing to a hardware supplier. And let's put that value into perspective. Remember earlier when we said Nvidia launched in '93 with a total of $40,000 in their bank account? Well, by early 2024, demand was so extreme that a single individual H100 chip was selling for 40 grand on eBay. Companies were buying them by the tens of thousands. The hardware became so incredibly valuable that tech executives reported their GPU deliveries were arriving at data centers in literal armored cars, armed guards for computer chips. Crazy, right? Finally, part 5, dominating the future, the circular AI economy. Because Nvidia isn't just sitting back and selling hardware anymore. No, they're actively orchestrating the future of the entire industry. They've essentially created this brilliant, almost circular investment strategy. Nvidia uses its massive cash reserves to invest billions into AI software companies, like $2 billion investment into Nubius, or the massive $100 billion MOU with OpenAI. So what happens next? Those companies take that capital and build massive new data centers. And what do they need to power those centers? Yep, billions of dollars worth of Nvidia's newest chips, like their Blackwell architecture. So by investing in these companies, Nvidia guarantees future buyers for its own hardware. It's a perfectly calculated loop. And their empire is expanding rapidly, way beyond pure chips. They're releasing massive open-source software models like Llama 3.1 Nemotron and a self-driving model called Alpamayo. They're building global infrastructure like Earth 2 for AI-driven weather forecasting. They are partnering with security firms like Trend Micro to protect the very data centers their chips live in. They even threw a $5 billion lifeline to prop up their former rival, Intel, just so Nvidia can offer their own powerful AI servers on Intel's architecture. They are weaving themselves into every single layer of the global tech ecosystem. Which leaves us with this final massive question. From a boost at a Denny's diner to a $5 trillion kingdom delivering chips and armored cars, Nvidia has completely rewritten the rules of computing. But as they cement their place as the absolute kingmakers of the AI revolution, we have to ask, what happens to the global tech landscape when a single hardware company becomes the foundational layer for all future human intelligence? It's a fascinating, maybe slightly unsettling reality, and it's definitely one we'll be watching unfold together. Thanks so much for tuning into this explainer. I hope you found it as mind-blowing as I did. See you next time.